what I always like to do when it comes to starting the interview at the Music Travel Guide podcast is to ask this question. So I would like to know more about how did you start in music? So what was the starting point?
Okay. Um, I guess I was always curious about music and I always gravitated towards music. And I grew up in a music loving household. So we always had, CDs around and radio. And I was about 5 when I asked my parents specifically to bring me to music school because I want to learn these things. So I'm practically studying music since the age of 5, 6, institutionally, and I guess that's that's the beginning.
Yeah. And the beginning in music, professionally speaking, when was the first step?
The
So,
switch, yeah, that's a good question. I think it was when I was 17, 18, in that year. So like last year of high school was the moment where I made the switch just flipped on me, and I told myself that okay, like this is it, this is 100% what I want to do. And it was the same year when I did my first paid gig as well.
ah, okay.
uh, I was a drummer in a reggae band in Lyon, France. I was an exchange student in France for that year, because even though I was like music was with me since like I was 5 or 6, around like 16, 17, I still wasn't sure if this is what I want to do professionally. So I was thinking about being I was looking at different options and career paths, and I wasn't sure what I'm going to study after high school. But last year of high school, I made the decision that this is what I want to do for sure. And ever since that, I didn't look back at all.
Of course, yeah. And so you started as a drummer, and
Yeah.
then you, uh, developed your artistic career in many different ways.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
great. I mean,
Yeah. So to be exact, I told my parents that I want to study drums, but that option wasn't available at the age of 5, 6, and almost everybody at that age starts with the recorder, the like small piccolo flute. And so I studied that for 3 years, and then I was able to transition to drums. But drums basically means classical percussion
okay,
in institutional, Hungarian music school system. So I ended up taking classical percussion lessons, which mainly consists of marimba and vibraphone, and then later drum kit. I was very lucky to have a very, very good teacher who was 360 in the percussion world, meaning he was a professional classical percussionist, but he was also playing jazz and modern styles on the drum kit. So we were kind of doing both, and I was studying with him for 6 years. And at the last few years of those studies, I fell in love with the vibraphone and improvisation, and I was already listening to a lot of Saint Germain and
mm, okay,
Herbalizer and some of
mm,
the new jazz or trip hop artists. So in my mind, I made the plan of becoming a jazz vibraphonist. And he said that if I'm really interested in jazz and improvisation, I will most definitely have to take piano lessons to just strengthen my knowledge in theory and harmony. And so I started to take piano lessons around the age of maybe 14, 15, something like that. And in a few years, I made the transition into practicing piano only. I guess, yeah, I never fully got into drum kit playing, so I wouldn't consider myself a drummer. I still play percussion, so rhythm is definitely my first love, but I felt more connected to the keyboards because it just encompassed everything. You can play rhythm, you can play bass, harmony, melody. It's just a very a broader I was connecting to it more. So yeah, at the age of 18, I was already only practicing piano. And then when I applied to a conservatory, I was applying for a jazz piano performance, and I left institutional percussion studies behind.
Yeah.
And to make the picture full, I think I bought my first turntable when I was 17 or 16, something like that. So that's when I
Okay.
bought my first turntable and mixer, and that's when I started to collect records as well, because I grew up listening to hip hop. So that was my first big love in a way. And so institutional music learning and exploring hip hop and DJing and sampling was kind of head to head with me from the last years of high school. And I kept on practicing and exploring both head
Sounds
to
really
head.
interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's curious because that's how I met you. I met you as a keyboardist. I
right.
still remember the performance at the
Yeah.
X Jazz Festival. Um, how much was important your interest in the club culture? If you think about your figure as a musician and composer, because
Yeah.
you got inspiration from different worlds. So how much was important, the club culture to Àbáse, so to your
Very
figure?
much, very much. There wouldn't be no Àbáse project without club culture, and especially the late '90s, early 2000s club scene in Budapest was very, very healthy and vivid. We had a lot of crews bringing in, you know, pioneering electronic sounds. We had drum and bass, breakbeat, lots of hip hop. We had reggae, dancehall. It was very, very, very good. Um, and I had an older sister and two older brothers. One of my older brother is a Goa DJ. My sister was a big Goa fan, so they were going into this trancey, more hard direction. But my other older brother was a big jazz and soulful music fan, so he was going to those type of parties. So, and they made sure that I'm introduced to that scene pretty early. So I got mixtapes and cassettes from my sister already, and then as soon as I was 15, 16, they took me into the nightlife, and those experiences were definitely very much inspirational
So
and
very young,
life
so
changing.
15. Yeah.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, Budapest is pretty relatively small, in like
Mm.
global terms. It has close to 2 million inhabitants, so it's definitely a big city, but it's small enough for you to be safe and comfortable. So, it's not as crazy as London or New York. So you can find your way around it easier. So that's why, yeah, our nightlife starts pretty early. People start to go out in an early age, I would say.
Yeah, of course. I never been to Budapest. I would love to visit the
No, you
city.
should try it. It's fun. It's a fun city to visit.
I will, of course. Um, what was your biggest inspiration at the time when you were 15, 16, and 17? So
It was hip hop for sure. It was
okay.
100% hip hop music. Yeah. We had some, I would say, hip hop and reggae, because we first started to go out to reggae parties, but hip hop was also very big. It was like head to head. So I never fully connected to drum and bass in that age. It was too aggressive for me, and I grew up listening to organic music. So we had jazz in my parents' collection, and some soulful Hungarian stuff. And like that was my base, so to say. So that
Yeah.
was what I was familiar with, and but what I connected to it authentically was hip hop, especially Black Star and Tribe Called Quest and Wu-Tang. We had one very good friend in our group in high school, in our class, who spent an exchange year in the States,
Okay.
and he came back completely changed, and he brought all these CDs. He brought Method Man, Wu-Tang, you know all the good stuff. So he was already educating us, but from my sister's side, she already had friends in the Budapest scene, who were hip hop DJs. So I remember when LimeWire came in, they were, and my sister told them that my little brother likes hip hop. They just downloaded a bunch of underground stuff, Gangstar and Fugees and Herbalizer and Dilated Peoples, like you name it. So I got a healthy dose from that too. And yeah, I guess that was then I listened those religiously.
So hip hop, and then
yeah, but I was lucky enough to come across Madlib from an early age, and my brother had a big CD collection, and whenever I wasn't just listening to hip hop, I was still listening to jazz. I loved jazz and all the organic music, and I would say from a very early age, I was like absorbing everything that I could. And my brother had this CD collection, and so whenever I was at his place, I would just by myself start go through the covers and the liner notes. So it was pretty organic for me. I just went after all the information I could get my hands on, before I knew about digging culture,
of course,
record collection. I was already doing it. And then when I understood sampling and hip hop, then it just all clicked immediately. And from that point, it was just an upward spiral. I guess, it just everything made sense. And I kept on listening as much music as I could. And then when the internet came in and we had sites like I don't even remember the names, but when we had LimeWire where you could download music, or just these sites where you could share information, like it wasn't even Wikipedia. I don't know, like some of these online cataloging sites. And then when iTunes came out, I was going through all the preview music. You remember those like 30-20 second previews?
Okay.
I was like starting to make a list of the records that I need to check out, because that was like the first like discography database, I guess, that I got my hand on. So if I knew that I like George Benson, I was checking out all the George Benson records, and I made a note of which albums will I have to watch out on the record stores.
I love
listen to the snippets, and so yeah, that was the learning process, I guess.
Beautiful. Yeah, I imagine yourself taking notes, from the latest album and releases.
Yeah.
The first thing I discovered about yourself was the correlation between your artistic name and the meaning, which is connected to Africa.
Yeah.
And the second thing was your latest album. So the album you released in 2021, and
Laroyê.
which the interesting thing for me was this beautiful combination between African rhythms, so African music, and Brazilian music. So why this connection to Africa and of course Brazilian music? Because for me it was the first time seeing this connection from a musician between two different worlds. Yeah.
Right. I mean, the way I see it is Brazilian music is practically African music. It's like an extra, even though the country itself is not on the continent, like what we know and like as Brazilian music, even though it could only happen in Brazil, and with the Western and Portuguese and other influences, it's still like a branch of African music. And I also didn't fully realize this until I was there, but the full story is that in the CD collection of my brother, he had a compilation of contemporary music influenced by Brazil. So not just Brazilian, but also European and American productions that were either using Brazilian samples or were collaborations with Brazilians. And I fell deeply in love with that compilation. So that was around the age of 12, maybe. So back then, it was like a very, very strong connection. And I kind of promised myself that I will travel to Brazil one day. And I just kept this promise to myself, and it was with me throughout high school and conservatory, and I knew that I one day I want to go there. And long story short, I was able to do it in 2017, but I booked a 5-month trip without any plans whatsoever. I really
Okay.
didn't. I was already hitchhiking in high school, and I was already hitchhiking in high school and traveling a lot. So in my mind, I kept all the options open. So I was ready to move there and like not come back to Europe at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was ready to work on music or study or just hitchhike for 5 months to explore the country. I really had no idea what I'm gonna do. All I knew is that I need to go there, and obviously music was the strongest connection. So I wanted to explore and learn as much as I could. And what ended up happening is instead of moving anywhere, I just stayed in Rio because I lived it with a musician who was able to took me around and kind of took me under his wing. His name is Eduardo Santana. He's a trumpet player and leader of a group called Afro. They are pretty big in Rio and around Brazil. It's a 6-7 piece Afrobeat slash hip hop slash jazz group. So it was
Didn't
the
know that.
perfect. Oh yeah.
I
Okay.
didn't
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, thanks for
No,
sharing.
amazing. Yeah, and so I was living with Eduardo, the trumpet player, who's leading the band, and Rodrigo, the bass player. So, and they just took me out wherever they could. So I wanted to use my time to really get to know the scene and the vibe of the city as much as possible, and and when I first came across candomblé, so religious like Afro-Brazilian music performed on the street, that was the first time when I fully understood why I had to be there and what did I like about Brazilian music. Because everything that I like in these, 60s, 70s or contemporary Brazilian styles, samba and MPB, I realized then that it all basically comes from candomblé, which is all coming from Africa. So that's when I fully understood sonically and spiritually that that influence is just so strong that it's now to me it's almost indistinguishable. It's the same musical and rhythmical tradition. So that was a very, very strong experience, and that's why I started to learn more about the culture and the religion of candomblé and that music. So I guess yeah, I could go on and on about this story. I don't
Yeah.
know, how much of it is interesting, but it was a very, very profound and important experience and learning curve for me, and that's why the main theme of the album as well is candomblé and African, influences and rhythm. So I didn't even it wasn't really a conscious thing for me to be like, okay, like I'm gonna show the African influence in Brazil. I just went after my kind of instincts and gut feeling, and I explored the side of Brazilian music that I fell in love with, and I collaborated with people who inspired me a lot, who I met there, and it's only natural that it's people with African heritage and strong African influence, because again it's indistinguishable now to me. I hope
Of course.
it makes sense.
No, absolutely. That's super interesting. It's amazing. Thanks to a compilation. So you got interesting into those vibrations, and
Yeah.
you decided to go there. Uh, Lovely. Um, and how was creating an album inspired by different genres, different contaminations? So how was the for you the creation process in terms of delivering what you feel inside with you, that is your profound connection to Brazilian music?
Right. So the the album being as diverse as it is became kind of a problem or an issue only later when we were planning to release it and try to prepare it for release, because I often had the advice of it should be chopped up into smaller EPs, or it should be, you should make different releases because some of the sounds are very electronic, some of the sounds are very organic. But the truth is that the creation process itself was so organic and profound and inspired that I had a very, very strong, connection to it. But also it just made me 100% sure that it needs to stay together, because that's how the picture becomes full for me. So the short answer is that it wasn't a conscious decision at all from my side. What I did, so again, I went to Brazil without any plans.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening is I wanted to study as much as possible. So I started to check out Brazilian styles and rhythms and composers and musicians strategically, as I would do in, I don't know, in a conservatory. So I was asking for as many recommendations as possible, and then I sat down and started to do the digging and learn about these things. But what ended up happening is that as soon as I was practicing with my instrument and learning songs, I always started to work on some ideas, or I got so inspired that I guess I had to let it out somewhere. And that was a very interesting feeling actually in Brazil, and it only happened to me there so far, where I got exposed to so many new inspirations and I had so many inputs that sometimes I felt full in my soul and body, that's where I started to meditate, because I just felt so overwhelmed, even though it was positive. Sometimes your body just can't take more joy, or even if it's good things, you can't handle it. So I guess what happened is that I was exposed to so many new ideas that I had to come out of me in some way. So I always ended up doing like demos or ideas, and I started to record them. And after a few weeks and a few ideas, it became more and more clear to me that I will actually have to do a musical project out of this. But in the beginning, I thought, okay, let's, try to do 4 songs or 6 songs. And then it ended up being 8 because some of the demos, some of these ideas are just exercises. Sometimes I was just copying a rhythm or trying to remake something on Ableton to see if I can get that same type of feeling. And some of them were jams that I did. So I to all the songs on Laroyê, you probably had 2, 3, or 4 ideas that I didn't end up using because they were like a closed creative road. But then the songs that ended up being on Laroyê were all composed or created in a very, very inspired and very organic manner, and they just ended up being songs. So it's a cliche now, but you hear from artists very often that they did something and it felt like it wasn't even them doing it, but they just realized what they did after they did it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's how all the songs were born in Laroyê. So the way I see it, it's more of to me, it was more of an audio journal in a way. That's how I refer to it, because I was just, traveling freely, creatively, and try to learn as much as possible from the culture and the music. But I was also going out every day or other day. So I went to, samba performances, or I went to a baile funk party. So if you hear a baile funk influence on the album, it was me going home immensely inspired by the club experience, and then just experimenting with beats at home the next day. Or if you hear a samba song, that's probably because of course it's all around in Brazil, and I was listening to Jorge Ben and so I wanted to keep the album as diverse as it is, because that Brazilian contemporary music is as diverse as the album. And also I always, my listening taste was always as diverse as the album. So I wanted to stick true to myself in this way. I wanted to stick true to the experience and the creation process. So one plan, for example, I had during the recording is that I don't want to touch it at all once I left Brazil. meaning that I'm not even editing anything. But then I kind of overrode this rule a little bit because I still wanted to polish it a bit, or we did like last minute recording, not last minute, but like we didn't have time to do all the recordings we wanted while I'm there. So some, like very few recordings were done from the distance, but I would say still like a good 80% of the sounds that you hear on the album were done just in that 5-month period, and I wanted to keep it as raw and organic to that experience as possible. And then I wanted to again keep it true to the Brazilian scene, because if I would have just done an organic EP, so to say, it wouldn't show you the full scope of the experience that you would get in Brazil,
Of course.
or what
Yeah.
or what people are into, because I think this is something that is also very much my generation's own, which is, some people call it the iPod generation or internet generation, where we are really used to shuffling things up. Like we didn't need to stick to like one genre or one crowd. It's not just, okay, you're a hip hop head or you're a rock head or a metal head or a ska head. I'm pretty used to just switching styles up. And
Yeah. So exploring a wide range of,
yeah
sounds and vibrations. Yeah.
yeah
What was the musician that impressed you the most? If you think about the collaborations you had, I mean, you've got amazing
from the collaborators on my album.
on the album, from the album,
Right. Good question. I mean, who impressed me the most was definitely Laroyê, because he's just such a giant musical genius. And it's a very upsetting and sad story, because just 2 days before our single came out, he passed away. So that affected me a lot, because you can imagine it was very, very emotional. He actually, I never met him in person, but he was one of the first people I got introduced to when I went there. So the first day I spent in Rio, I was talking to the bass player Rodrigo, and I was asking him about cool contemporary projects, and Orchestra Rumpiles was the first one actually that
the first one. Okay.
So Orchestra Rumpiles is this big band that Laroyê founded and conducted until his death, and it's still a working orchestra. And he composed this beautiful music for percussions and horns only, just mixing the traditions of batucada and blocos and candomblé rhythms and just contemporary harmony and jazz. It's an incredible project. And the way I look at him, he's kind of the Quincy Jones of Brazil in a way.
Okay.
In the sense that, of course, his arrangements are incredible, but he's also 360. So some of his projects are, focused on more contemporary music, and he's collaborating with singers and artists from across eras. So I got to play with him, funnily enough, during the pandemic in an online festival.
Okay.
And the aim of that project was to improvise freely through the internet, through a similar conversation that we have now through this platform. The four of us were playing through this platform and improvising with the delay that we had or any technical issues, and that was a very free sonic experience. But I'm really, really proud that it happened, and I was so happy when he reached out to me to collaborate on that with him. But when I first wrote to him, I was shaking. I was so nervous, because because I keep him in like very, very high regards, and to me he's one of those timeless musical legends. And I was very, very grateful and honored that he accepted the invitation and that he was happy about the collaboration. So yeah, he's just an incredible character. So I guess if the question is who inspired me the most, it was probably him.
Uh, Thank you for sharing.
Yeah,
Great.
of course.
Yeah, I'm learning a lot from you. And so was Rio de Janeiro, because you mentioned Rio de Janeiro, was Rio de
Right.
Janeiro the city where, you know, you spent most of your time when you were in
Yeah.
Brazil? And
Yes, I
okay.
spent 4 months in Rio and then 1 month in Salvador, Bahia.
Yeah, I imagine Rio was, you know, the main source of inspiration for you, if I, you know, think about
Salvador was the heaviest for sure.
Salvador. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So I intentionally booked my return ticket from Salvador to force myself to visit it, whatever happens. Because
Okay.
again, I had no plans, so I didn't know how the journey gonna end up happening. But I knew that whatever happens, I need to see Salvador because I knew that it's the city with the most African heritage and culture. Because Salvador was the first, or I don't want to be wrong, but I think it was either the first or one of the first capitals as well. And it was sadly the city where the slaves arrived. So Salvador has the biggest black population.
Yeah.
And as you go further south in Brazil, the more European it gets in a way. So down south, you even have villages that are like fully German speaking, for example.
So that's where you
It's very
got,
weird.
yeah. So that's where you got, for example, the um, uh, African touch into the album, right? Is that correct?
I mean, again, it was everywhere. So
Right.
the African influence is undeniable everywhere, but even people in Rio would tell you that it's the strongest in Salvador. So it was definitely strong enough already in Rio, and it was profound and important. But Salvador is the place where you feel it one on one the most. Like it's just fully undeniable there. You know, like some of these streets when you walk in Salvador, you feel like you're in Africa. Because I was lucky to be able to visit Ivory Coast and Ghana not long after I came back home from Brazil, and it was almost like I'm walking the same streets. And that's where the the religious practices and some of the music is the most intact as well. So yeah, it's funny. I would say that even though I spent 4 times as much time in Rio, Salvador was probably twice as strong of an influence in a way. It's hard to tell because I mean, it's hard to explain properly because I love Rio and I had so much experience, and it's not something that you really can quantify. But people told me that as soon as I land in Salvador and like get out of the airport, I would feel this energy, and I did feel it. You know, it's something like people say to each other, and they say that, yeah, you're gonna love it. It will be great. And I was like, yeah, I'm sure it will be great. But as soon as
Yeah.
I stepped out of the airport, I just felt this power, that just felt across Salvador. So it's yeah, it's hard to explain. You just need to go and try
Yeah,
and
of
try it.
course.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and I would tell everybody, I would advise everyone to just go and visit Salvador and
I
anywhere you can go in Brazil because it's so beautiful.
I never been to Brazil. I am Italian. I was born and raised in Italy, even though
All right.
I have Latin origins. So I'm
Okay.
Afro-Panamanian. I
Okay.
grew up listening to salsa music.
Right.
And so salsa music legends, Tito Puente, Hector Lavoe, El Gran Combo, Ruben Blades. But I always, I mean, I would like to explore more Brazilian music. Um, I went to see, I don't remember the name of the artist. It's such a big artist. Marcos Valle at Grecchen.
Yeah.
And I had an interview with Azimuth at the Jazz Festival in Italy.
Amazing.
Yeah, they
Amazing.
were great. Yeah, they were really kind, and it's such a melting pot. And I can, see this. I can feel this melting pot you got from, being Brazil. And
And fun fact that Marcos Maya, sorry to cut you off, but
no, go ahead.
Marcos Valle's music was the first song on that compilation that I fell in love with, and
Oh,
it's one of my favorite songs. And Marcos again is one of my favorite artists because he's the type of character who's whose journey is longer than half a decade now. Like
yeah, it
his
is.
first album came out in the 50s, so he comes from
Absolutely.
the samba MPB world, but he's still doing like broken beat in
It is.
the
It
years
is.
2000. So, and that is so amazing to me, and I look up to those people greatly, and that's
Yeah.
why I look up to Laroyê a lot too. So yeah, Marcos is funny because Marcos was the first Brazilian music that I ever heard, and
Oh,
he's
that's amazing.
still one of the biggest inspiration. Yeah,
Another Brazilian musician which I love is Gilberto Silva.
yeah, of course.
Yeah, yeah, which he has a correlation to funk music. I mean, I listened to some of his songs from an album that I don't remember the name, and I heard some funk
Oh yeah,
vibration into it, and
yeah. Black American music is such a huge inspiration
yeah,
in Brazil. Yeah, yeah, it's beautiful to see how these different scenes are inspiring each other.
and are
Like
connected at the
how,
same time. Yeah,
yeah, because while the big bossa nova craze was happening in the States,
mm.
people were getting down to James Brown and all these soul artists in Brazil.
Yeah, it is.
And it's very interesting to see these cultural exchanges.
So let's say someone. I mean, if I'm thinking about the people who are listening to this episode and don't know you, how and is their first time listening to you, discovering music. How would you describe your music? Because it's I mean it covers many worlds and inspirations.
Right. So I would probably describe it as diverse music that is blending organic improvisational music with contemporary production and sampling and hip hop, and it's blending African influence music with Brazilian and jazz,
Right.
all under the umbrella of hip hop. So it's funny because the way I see the hip hop is like the umbrella, is the culture
Yeah.
where it comes from, but it also comes from, rare groove and DJing and club music, which to
Yes.
me encompasses it all. So if you spend the night in a club, um, the warm-up set would be smoother and organic, and the end of the night would be more pumping and electronic. And I kind of naturally always try to not even try to, but I just naturally go into all these territories. And some of my favorite albums do take this journey where you start from something smooth and you end up dancing. And yeah, rhythm is definitely the one of the main elements of my music. But yeah, in a nutshell, it's definitely African and Brazilian influences mashed up with club culture and hip hop, and all in an improvised, organic manner,
Yes.
inspired by jazz music.
Of course. Yeah. The first time I discovered you, I started listening to your latest album. Um, so let's say I'm new to you, I'm new to Àbáse. Um, um, what would you suggest? So, what people do they need to start from your latest in terms of discovering you, your sound, your inspirations? Do you think they need to start from your latest album, or because you also have some singles as well, Elevate,
Yeah, yeah,
which I love. I love
yeah.
Elevate. I love that
Yeah,
album.
thank you. Yeah,
Yeah,
Elevate was the very, very first one. It didn't when it came out. It wasn't even Àbáse. It came out just as subby
yeah.
because I really had no idea what I'm doing. um, so the question is, what would I advise people to listen to first, as in
Yes.
songs or projects?
Yeah, both. Whether if it's a song or a project. Yeah.
Right. That's a good question. I think I love the song Sambo from Invocation,
Okay.
because that was how did we do it? Because I actually, even though, yeah, the timeline of my releases are funny because I already had most of Invocation recorded when I traveled to Brazil.
Mm.
And so I came back from Brazil having the Laroyê material on my hard drive. So ever since I came back at the like summer of 2017, I was trying to figure out how and in what order to release these projects, because I had to go to Brazil to fully solidify the idea of Àbáse, and because I didn't even have the Àbáse name or concept ready when I went there. But the experiences in Brazil gave me the confidence and the inspiration to like pursue what I pursue now. But Sambo is a track that we recorded after I came back from Brazil, and also not too far, so not too I didn't have too much time, there was
Okay.
not much time between I came back and when we recorded Sambo. And we tracked the instrumental in Berlin, but I recorded the vocals and the kologo playing in Ghana.
Mm.
And so I would say that song very strongly encompasses everything that I'm deeply influenced about. So Sambo already has some of the Berlin club and electronic influences. It obviously has a very strong connection to Africa, because we did the vocals with a North African singer, and the playing is fully live. There's no click track, nothing. It's just 5 musicians in the same room. And so I was always very proud of that song, because it kind of it was after I already did most of Laroyê and most of Invocation, but it was something very fresh that we did right when I came back. So Sambo is one. And then Skin Goes All City is another track that was the first track that we released as Àbáse.
I don't think I
Because
listened to. I don't think I listened to.
Skin Goes All City is, I think, the 3rd song on Invocation. And I love that because it's a quartet recording, so it's only 4 musicians. And again, it's freely played, in the sense that there's no editing, there's no click track, nothing. It's just 4 people in the same room. And it shows our inspiration or like dedication to jazz and just the culture of playing together, and acoustic instruments, but it still has the hip hop influences. So to me, it was one of the very first tracks that I said, okay, like this is something that is, I think, special and in a way unique to us. And I was very proud when we did it. It was during the Invocation sessions. So Skin Goes All City, Sambo, I would start with those tracks. And when it comes to Laroyê, I would definitely say Agangatolu, and also Avenida 7.
Oh,
Avenida 7, yeah.
Avenida 7 is my favorite one.
Thank
And I
you.
love
Yeah.
Avenida. I love it. I love that song. It reminds me of Azimuth in some ways.
Oh yeah? Oh,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. That's beautiful
Yeah.
to hear.
There's a song from Azimuth which is called Villa Mariana, which is a tribute to, a city. It reminds me, a little bit that song. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, but I also like to I try to construct these projects to add up to a journey. So, and I also came from the culture of Walkmans. So I was like, most of my high school years, I only had a Walkman, which means that I was listening to albums beginning to end. There wasn't too many options to skip and whatever. So I love longer musical journeys. That's why I'm like, many of my songs or compositions are pretty long, and also the albums tend to be a bit longer than usual. So if someone has the time, I would advise them to try to listen them from beginning to the end, because that's when you really get the full picture.
Of course, yeah. Thank you for sharing. I was,
of course.
Really had, a good time. It was wonderful knowing more about yourself.
Sure.
Where people can find you? I know that you've been touring with Wayne Snow, and now it.
Yeah. So
Okay.
since I'm Berlin, I'm playing keyboards for Wayne Snow, who's an amazing Nigerian artist based in Berlin. He just released a beautiful album called Figurine back in September 2021, and we are currently in the middle of touring that project. I'm also playing in the band of Ziggy Zeitgeist, who's an amazing Australian drummer who moved to Berlin around the same time when I moved here, and I've always loved his music, and I feel like we are on a very similar musical path, so we connected organically, and we've been playing in each other's projects ever since. So watch out for Zeitgeist, Freedom, Energy Exchange, and their new label Energy Exchange Records, because they are putting out some beautiful um, genre crossing music. And people should watch out for Àbáse, because we recorded a brand new album this May, 12 tracks with a Berlin-based international rhythm section, all live, all done in Brewery Studios, which is a Berlin-based studio, and we are collaborating on the release with Analog Foundation, which is a group of amazing engineers and music lovers who are committed to analog technologies. So the material is already sounding amazing. It will definitely be the best sounding material, and the one that I'm the most proud of already. So I'm really, really excited about that release, and hopefully we will be able to tour that one with the 6-piece live band. So yeah, I'm very excited about next year.
Yeah, I
And
imagine.
the platform I'm most active on is definitely Instagram, because that format and ended up working well. That was the one that I understood, and so people can keep up with me on Instagram probably the most. I'm not really
Okay.
using Facebook or anything else, so yeah, watch out for my record label Oshu Records, because we have a lot of releases planned for the next year with the Berlin community. I'm trying to collaborate with as many people as possible from this scene and even back home in Budapest. So yeah, I'm very happy that it seems like it will be a busy year.
Of course, of course. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today, Àbáse. It was lovely.
Of course, of course, Michael. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
No, it's my pleasure. I love your music. Basically, I love variety. I love multifaceted, and you
Thanks.
know, um, but watching musicians like you, especially musician or performing live shows, it it always it's always inspiring. For what I do, for what I want to share, for what I want to do in my life. So
Amazing. That's amazing to hear. Thank you. And I would also love to, take the opportunity and thank everybody who listened this far in this podcast, and also anybody who listened my music or is going to click on one of these recommendations that we just gave. Because yeah, I really appreciate each and one of you, because it wouldn't be possible without the music lovers and supporters. And thank you, and please keep on supporting independent music, because it's rough out there, but we are getting inspired every day, and all we want to do is like give back, some of the inspirations, and it only makes sense when it's a full circle. So we appreciate everybody who is supporting independent music, and people like you, Michael, too, who helps to spread the word. So yeah, it's yeah, I appreciate everybody who's supporting what we do.